Hey Matt, how you doing?
Well, thanks.
Uh, Obviously, a lot of speculation as to exactly what's maybe going on at safety right now. Can you contrast and compare Proctor and Hooker and how those guys are playing going into the season?
Yeah, I think they both, well, for one, I think they're outstanding players and outstanding young men. I think they've got a little bit different skill set, which I think is a good thing. I think situationally, one skill set versus the other allows us to be, a little bit more multiple where we need to be and play them in some different spots. Again, I think they both played at a high level, and we're counting on those guys in a big way for us this season.
Yeah, obviously, last season against Clemson, you guys played more two high safety after being in the one high safety look most of the season. You have a grasp right now about how much that will be incorporated in defense this year as far as the two high looks? Is it going to be more situational, or could it be a greater part of the defense throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, we're really running the same defense. If you look at us, we're really not a split safety team. I played a dabbled in a little bit here and there in the Clemson game, but even then it was mostly rotational. So we're kind of getting back in the middle field. Sort of if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Next up, Bill Rabinowitz with the Columbus Dispatch and Dan Hope on deck. Bill?
Yeah, Matt, following Nathan's question, could you just kind of, you said they both have different styles, and could you just kind of describe what each of them brings, Marcus and Josh?
Yeah. I think, when I think of Marcus Hooker, I think of a true center fielder. I think of a really rangy player that's instinctive, that has, I would go as far as to say, freakish ball skills. I think he really tracks the ball well and does a great job of going to get it. Runs the alley well for us in the run game. And I think Josh Proctor brings a lot of those same things to the table, but I think with Proctor, he's probably as far as coverage ability and the ability to go down and play man-to-man or play closer to the box. I think that's, kind of the biggest difference between the two is, again, Hooker's sort of the center fielder, and Proctor is probably, a little more comfortable playing man-to-man and those types of things. But, they both can do both, and they both have done both at a high level. But, in my opinion, that's the difference between the two.
Marcus obviously had his brother here, and the way you describe him, I mean, sounds a little bit like Malik. I know that's before your time, but how fair a comparison is that? And, it's kind of unfair in a way because you don't want to be compared to your brother, but how similar are they as players?
Well, as you mentioned, Bill, I wasn't here, so I'm kind of just, I lean on a little bit of the film that I've watched of Malik and the stories that I've heard. My understanding is there are a lot of similarities. But, again, I don't, is it unfair to compare him to his brother? I'm not sure. I don't know that I'm the best person to ask to answer that question because I don't have a ton of experience with, watching Malik.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.
Sure.
Next up, Dan Hope with 11 Warriors and Austin Ward on deck. Dan?
Hey, Matt, I know that you have the safeties coach title now. What exactly is the dynamic like between you and Kerry in terms of working together in the secondary?
Well, I think in the secondary, it's critical that there's not too many voices. And I believe that for quite a long time. I think, if you've got, even if you're trying to say the same thing, just saying something in a slightly different way sometimes can cause confusion. But if, Kerry does a great job, he runs our room and gets everyone on the same page. And, I try to do is assist Kerry as best that I can and give him some opinions and things like that. But I do think it's a great thing that our kids, our players are hearing one voice in the front of the room. And that way there's, again, I think it detracts from the ability to, for there to be confusion. I think everyone's on the same page. And again, Kerry does a great job of running the room and making sure we're organized in that way.
So do you guys meet together with cornerbacks and safeties, or do you guys split that up?
No, we meet together.
Thanks, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, Austin Ward with Letterman Row and Joey Kaufman on deck. Austin?
Hey, Matt.
Hey.
I don't think there's ever been any real doubt about the athleticism that Josh brings. And he just hasn't had that chance maybe yet to really show it. What would it take in your mind? What are you hoping to see from him as he tries to get to that next level?
I think the big thing for Josh is consistency. I mean, he's got some unbelievable talent and ability and potential. And I've seen him make some outstanding plays. And again, I think the big thing for Josh is showing up every day, being right on all the little things, all the details, and consistently getting it right, not just one day and then take a step back the next. I think we just got to continue to build small victories and put one good day, in front of or behind another.
Coach Day mentioned this yesterday, that part of the reason this is so important for you to get it right at safety is that Jordan was so valuable for so long, and that maybe he didn't get the credit that he deserved for that. So, what else are you replacing besides, I guess, the same question as Josh? You're not just replacing athleticism. To take that role, what else is required to play a Jordan Fuller role there?
Yeah. Well, I can speak to, for Jordan, I thought about it as highly of Jordan as I've ever thought of any player. Extremely intelligent, very diligent, never let any of his success or, the fact that he was an older player, but, by the time I worked with him, he never let that affect his work ethic. Was extremely coachable. And really, not only was he our free safety, he was really the quarterback of our defense. I mean, he really had a handle, and a lot of times he really would see things on the field that we either didn't see or we didn't see as fast as he did. And, when we're out at practice, you try to help the guys out and give them some alerts and things like that based off of formations you see. And when you had Fuller back there, he's giving the alerts before we even saw it as coaches. I mean, he is just a brilliant mind, and a guy that worked extremely hard at it. So that's where, again, the consistency comes in. And, that starts, in my opinion, with, knowing your own job through and through, so that you don't really ever have to think about where you line up or what your responsibility is. You've already known that, you have such a thorough knowledge of the defense that you're already aligned, and now you're helping 2 or 3 other people get aligned, and you're making, formation indicator alerts and things of that nature. And that's the piece that we've got to continue to develop with these newer players.
Thanks, Matt.
Sure.
Next up, Joey Kaufman, the Columbus Dispatch, with Bill Landis on deck. Joey?
Matt, as far as special teams goes, the one guy you have to replace there is Liam McCullough, long snapper, had certainly been a mainstay there. How is that competition to replace him gone?
So far, so good. It's just one of those things when you have a newer player, an inexperienced player, you want to see what it's going to be like when it's real. I think our practice, our snaps in practice have been good. And again, we're just looking for consistency there. And you try to find creative ways to put those guys in positions where, they feel like they've got to operate under some pressure and those types of things. So again, so far so good, but I'll reserve my judgments until we get to the field. I think that's the case anytime you're playing young players. You got to see what you get when you get them out there, and it matters.
Have you settled on anybody between Bradley or Rowan?
Right now, Brad Robinson is our starting long snapper. Just like any other position, it's they're not set in stone, and ultimately we're going to make sure we've got the guy out there that gives us the best opportunity to win.
Next up, Bill Landis with The Athletic, and Brendan Gulick on deck. Bill?
Hey, Matt, even if you guys are sort of sticking to what you did last year with the deep middle safety, do you anticipate being able to play with Marcus and Josh on the field together, maybe more than you played with 2 safeties on the field together last year? And can Josh do some of the things that you guys were asking Pete Werner to do last year when he was in that position?
Yeah, I think anytime you have players that can be versatile and do different things, it kind of goes back to the question that was asked a few questions ago, and what do I see the differences between those guys? I mean, yeah, I think if we can get those guys on the field, I think it comes down to the situation, the offensive, the team we're playing, and the personnel grouping that they have on the field. If we're, obviously, probably everybody would say, okay, what's the difference between Pete Werner and Josh Proctor? You probably gain a little bit, you gain a little bit more with Pete in the run game than you would with Josh. You probably gain a little bit more in the throw game with Josh than you would with Pete. So some of those things will be situational and based on the offensive personnel that's on the field and what we think we're going to get at that time.
And then special teams question, who do you have working at punt returner and kick returner, and what have you thought about what you've seen there so far?
Well, we've got a myriad of guys that we're trying to get experience. COVID has really changed the depth, just how you view your roster and things like that. And in the back of your mind these days is always, well, what if something happens in this room and, these three guys can't go. So you try to develop as many guys as you can and have some different guys at position groups and guys from different position groups that can help you at those spots in case, something goes awry. But, it's a lot of the same guys that worked it last year. Garrett Wilson, DeMario McCall, Jackson Smith has done an unbelievable job. He's very natural catching. Cameron Martinez is another guy that's a new guy that we've been working some return game with. X Johnson, obviously Chris Olave. So there's a big cast of characters. Now, who are we going to see out there on Saturdays? I'm not ready to tell you that quite yet. And it'll likely be, not just one guy the whole season. Try to get some different guys some opportunities.
Thanks.
Next up, Brendan Gulick, Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated with Colin Hass-Hill on deck. Brendan?
Hey, Matt. Thanks again for taking some time here.
Sure.
Let's start maybe on a special teams side. Blake Hobbeal's been really consistent. What has most impressed you about the way he's gone about his business?
Well, I mean, he really he hones his craft. Again, it's kind of the same conversation as Jordan Fuller. I mean, he's an older guy, been very successful, but he's still very coachable. He still works really, really hard at it. I think one of my favorite qualities about Blake is he's such a good teammate. He watches all the specialists, the snappers, the punters. He's always got feedback for them and things that he thinks that may help them or something that might be worth a try. So Blake's been very steady. We're looking for more of the same, and hopefully he gets an opportunity to show what he can do in some critical situations. You go back to the big kick there at the end of the half against Northwestern last year, and he executed at a high level there. So expect more of the same in that regard. Like to see more consistency from him on his kickoffs. I know he would tell you the same thing. Again, I just think he's done a great job with helping to bring some of the other guys in the specialist room along.
I want to ask you a question, too, about sort of your career trajectory and your path so far. As you've built your career here, you've been in a couple of different places, Division III, Division II, and a few different Division I schools. What is unique to you about being at Ohio State? And maybe, obviously, the pandemic has made this a pretty chaotic year, but is there something that you're finding different and better for you in year two at Ohio State than you had last year?
Well, just a little bit, for my personally, a level of comfortability here and in every way, I think particularly relationships with the players. And, when you're brand new, it's really hard to coach a player the way that they should be coached without any sort of pre-existing relationship. That player needs to trust you, and you got to find the ins and outs of what really makes that player tick. So just time spent, has been big for me to sort of really get to know our players and to build trust on both sides. And that's been big for me and just a general level of comfortability here and everything, just the way, what to expect on a Tuesday practice during the season, what to expect, on a Friday walkthrough after having a full season of doing it now. And then what's different here compared to maybe some of the other places I've been, I would say the biggest thing is our culture. I think our culture here is elite. Obviously that starts with our head football coach, Coach Day, and that has permeated through the team. I think our leadership, our accountability, again, just our culture and the way our kids respond to things, I think is far different and significantly better than any place I've ever been.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next up, Colin Hass-Hill with 11 Warriors and Tim May on deck. Colin?
Hey, Matt, you mentioned that you want to and you plan to play that single high safety often, but you also mentioned, what Jordan Fuller did so well back there. So I just wonder, what have Marcus Hooker and Josh Proctor showed you that make you think that they can take over that role and still allow you to play that same defense?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think, when it comes to physical talent, I don't think there's any shortage of talent for either one. So it's just a matter of getting those guys enough reps and showing those guys enough film and really just kind of football 101 conversations that, because I don't think, if you ask Jordan Fuller, I don't think he would say that his biggest strength was his athleticism. I mean, he was obviously plenty athletic and made a ton of plays here, but those guys are probably, at least as athletic, if not more, and certainly have the skills. But we all know that that's not, it's not always the fastest guy is the best player. It's not always the guy that jumps the highest or is the tallest or the heaviest that are the best players. It's the guy that's the best at playing the game, and a huge part of that is football IQ. And Jordan's football IQ was through the roof. So I think Josh and Marcus are both very smart, very capable players. But there is no substitute for experience. So we just got to keep finding ways to get these guys, more and more reps and to show them, things to expect. And a lot of it is about understanding, the weaknesses of the coverages and the defenses that you play and how offenses want to attack those coverages. And then what are the tells that the offenses are giving you when they're going to attack, and how do you respond accordingly to make sure that whatever issues that exist within that coverage, we have an answer for, and we're alert to it. And again, that's the thing that Jordan did so well. So, those guys have done a good job, but again, just looking for more consistency from them. So it's, every time we see that formation indicator, we're alerting it and have the appropriate response.
And then at cornerback, who has sort of stood out across the field from Shaun Wade thus far in your practices?
We've had a number of guys. I think some of those young guys have been really good. Legend Cavazos, before he got hurt, did a great job. Ryan Watts has been dinged up a little bit. Ryan Watts, I think, is going to be a special player. The guy that I really like to watch, and he's brand new to playing on the defensive side of the ball, is Cam Martinez. I think he's got the right mentality. Tyreek Johnson's played a bunch of snaps opposite of Shaun Wade and played at a really high level. And we're getting back into, Seven Banks and Cameron Brown. Those guys are elite as well. So I think we've got a really good group, and it's just about, again, finding ways to get those guys the reps they need to be ready when it counts.
Thanks.
Next up, Tim May from the Tim May podcast and Letterman Row, and Pat Murphy on deck. Tim?
Thank you very much, Jerry. I was just wondering, Matt, during this, I don't know if you call it downtime, but during this purgatory time for you guys in football, have you watched, do you sit and watch NFL and college teams, special teams play it especially, and glean ideas from them? And of course, I'm talking about the watermelon kick that's become famous now, but I just think back to y'all's onside kick, Blake to Chris Olave last year, which seemed to come from Australian rules football. But just how do you sort of like keep fresh in terms of what could be possible in that realm?
Yeah, I'm honestly, Tim, I'm not ashamed to say I'm a complete football nerd, just a football junkie. I love to watch football, always have. I love to study football, and I've been very fortunate to. Someone mentioned my career trajectory earlier. I've been very fortunate to be here at a relatively young age, and I'm not ashamed to say that I don't know that I've had an original idea yet. Fortunately, I can recognize good things when I see them, and there's plenty of smart coaches that have been out there through the years that have done some really cool things, and we try to see what fits for us and what fits our personnel, and knowing that there's always a balance between what you like and what you think would be really good, and then what you can actually really go execute when it counts. So like that kick to Chris Olave, it looked perfect when we hit it, but we had to hit that thing 40 times in practice before we got it right. And I can tell you, it never looked as good in practice as it did in the game. So, that's what you're looking for. We look for maybe less in scheme ideas and things like that from these games that are being played right now. But the thing that I think we've done a great job with, and again, this stems from Coach Day, but I think we've done a good job of trying to use some of these early games that have been played and identifying a lot of the mistakes, quite frankly. You mentioned the onside kick there, and it was the Cowboys-Falcons game, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And, just trying to learn from mistakes and see where, if we can see something on film and get it coached up and talk through the situation and how we want our guys to handle it, then, I think that's smart coaching. And again, not an original idea for me. That one's from Coach Day. So
Yeah, I got you, man. Hey, one other quickie. You have a nice perspective as you watch your guys, video of your guys, especially from the safety aspect of the Ohio State offense. What has jumped out at you over the last several weeks about this Ohio State offense? Maybe give people a peek behind the curtains of what could be a little different about them. What do you see that just jumps out at you, I guess?
Well, I think anyone that's been, and obviously with COVID, very few people have been in practice, but anyone that has watched us is you see how electric this receiving core is. And then obviously we have, I think, very talented tight ends as well. And I think the backs have looked great. And we got probably the best returning offensive line in college football. So there's really just so much talent. And then obviously, Heisman Trophy candidate Justin Fields is at the helm. But the big thing is in the pass game, there's just so many weapons at receiver now, and they're all very good. And there ain't one of them that's average. I mean, they are extremely good. It is, again, I've been very fortunate in this profession to be at some good places with some great players, and I've never seen a receiving core that is anywhere even close to resembling the amount of speed and talent that these guys have. And the thing that we've done is we've taken because a lot of these guys are young. We've taken these young guys and developed them. I think Brian Hartline is the best receivers coach in the country. The proof is at practice. I see it every day. I mean, those guys are really, really tough to cover, and that quarterback doesn't miss much. So that's what sticks out to me.
Hey, thanks, man.
Sure. Thank you. Tim.
Next up, Pat Murphy from 24/7 Sports with Jeremy Birmingham on deck. Pat?
Matt, another question about the safeties and Jordan. I assume that while you would love those guys to give you exactly what Jordan got, they're different players, right? They bring different things to the table, and you don't expect a Jordan Fuller to emerge from one of them. Is that correct?
Jordan Fuller plays for the Rams, so I certainly don't expect to see him. But I think in their own way, I think we do expect those guys to play at a high level. We expect them to be the cap of our defense and help not only, make the plays that they're supposed to make, but we expect them to get, corners and linebackers and all the underneath coverage. We expect them to help get them aligned appropriately. And there certainly is no change in expectations. But we also know that Jordan was a special player, and the good thing is these guys were here with Jordan, and they know all the things that he did, and they respect him tremendously. I'll tell you that. And truthfully, I think they aspire to be very similar to him in a lot of ways. But I think you've got to be very careful trying to be somebody else. I think you got to be yourself. I think you got to play to your own strengths. I think you got to be very realistic with what your own weaknesses are, identify those things, and figure out how to marginalize those things, So I can say that the expectations are no different. We expect those guys to perform at a high level and be the quarterback of the defense.
And you mentioned Bradley taking the long snapping job. What went into making that decision? What did he do to win that?
So far, he's been the most consistent, really. And, I don't put a lot of stock in snaps that they chart when they're off doing their own thing. I want to know what I chart the snaps that they do in our team punt periods, when the head football coach is there and there's a rush team and, that rush team's trying to go block the punt and those types of things. So it's really, to me, those periods are critical in evaluating those snappers. And right now, Brad has been more consistent.
Thanks, Matt.
Next up, Jeremy Birmingham with Letterman Row, and we'll close with Spencer Holbrook unless I've missed someone there. So, Jeremy, you're up.
Hey, Matt. Early in the summer, in the process, we heard a lot about Court Williams after he made the early enrollment. We haven't heard much about him lately, so I'm just wondering if you could update where he's at as far as his development and sliding back into a full-time safety role.
I think we'll speak on that another time. I appreciate the question, Jeremy. I think Court's an outstanding player and one of the best young men I've ever been around. I can just tell you that.
And if I could also, with Lathan Ransom and Cameron Martinez, obviously coming from a different perspective because Cam never played defense in high school, and Lathan obviously was an All-American. Those two were the non-early enrollees in the secondary. How have they adjusted, and are you a little bit surprised at how far along Cam is right now?
You know, if you get to know Cam, you're not surprised by anything he ever does, man. I mean, he is a blue-collar, chip on his shoulder. You know, he can get – it looks bad one rep, but he's going to get it corrected the next one. I mean, he takes so much pride, and I just love his demeanor. I think he is a legit tough guy. I really do. Now, he's got a lot of room to improve because it's all brand new to him, but nothing that he does that's positive will ever surprise me just because of who he is, his personality. And really the thing that they both have done a great job of is asking for help. You know, they know that they don't know right now. And so they're in here for extra meetings. And, between the two of them, I can't tell you how many Zoom calls and things like that we've done with questions and constant texts, and they'll send me video clips and things like that. So, I think for as talented a group as that young defensive back group is, I think the best thing they have going is they all desire to be great. There really hasn't been any of that big recruit ego coming in. They got all the answers. There's just none of that. I mean, these are great kids, and I think we did a good job in recruiting, identifying who these young men really are and their personalities, and I think we got it right, and I think it's going to be a special group as they progress.
Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Next up, Spencer Holbrook with Letterman Row, and then we'll close with Clay Hall. Spencer?
Hey, Matt. You got 4 wide receivers that are all freshmen coming in, and they seem to all possess different, punt returning skills. What have you seen out of each of those guys that make them different from each other, and how can you kind of utilize them on special teams in different ways?
Yeah, Spencer, I would agree with you. I think that as talented as that group is, I think they all bring something very different to the table. You look at a guy like Mookie Cooper, and he's extremely talented ball and hand guy. I think he's a guy that down the line can help us as a returner. But then I watch him some the other day, and I mean, he really sticks his nose in and does all the things that you'd ask a bigger guy to do, even though he's not the biggest guy. G. Scott is a bigger guy, and G. Scott plays like a linebacker. And I mean that in a great way. I mean, he's extremely explosive and makes a bunch of plays outside, but he is as tough a young wide receiver as I think I've seen in my career. I mean, I look for big things from him in special teams, probably less as a returner or someone that's going to field the ball. But, I trust him to go down and cover kicks and help us set up big returns and things like that. Julian Fleming is another bigger guy that can really run. So again, coverage units, gunner, kickoff, KOR, those types of things. And then, Jackson is just so smooth and has just unbelievable ball skills. He's a guy I think can really help us at returner and, anything involving the football as it comes to kicking game. I think that's where he would really be great. So 4 very different players, but all adding a lot of value to our special teams depth.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next up, Clay Hall with WSYX, and we are going to have one more question from Stephen Means on decks. But Clay, you're up first. Clay?
Yeah, Coach, thanks for the time. You've talked a lot about the talent and ability. I'm just curious, what's your sense of the makeup or the heartbeat or the motivation of this team? We heard a lot about the sting of the Clemson loss. How driven is this group, I guess, would be the question.
I think very driven. I think we've got great senior leadership. We got a ton of guys here that have played a lot of football. On the defensive side of the ball, you've got, Jonathan Cooper. I think as highly of Jonathan Cooper as any player I've ever been around, just from a leadership standpoint, toughness. Tough Borland, Pete Werner, all those, Sean Wade. So there's a ton of leadership on the defensive side of the ball. And then, offensively, you look at guys like Chris Olave, Luke Farrell, obviously Justin Fields, an unbelievable leader, Wyatt Davis, Josh Myers. So I think it's a hungry crew. I think we've got a chip on our shoulder. I think that, that Clemson loss is never too far from anyone in this program's mind. And I think we've got a really driven group. So I'm excited just excited we get a chance to go play. Obviously, it seemed like there for a while we weren't going to have a chance. So, I think everybody wants to make the most of this opportunity.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
And final questions for Coach Barnes today come from Stephen Means with Cleveland.com. Stephen?
Hey, Matt, since he's technically signed, can you talk about Jesse Mirko a little bit and just how you stumbled upon him?
Yeah, so there's a service in Australia called ProKick, and they have an unbelievable track record of producing talent. So I've dealt with them in the past, and another school I was at, I had a very talented Australian punter that came through ProKick as well. So those guys have a great track record, and that's kind of how that relationship came about.
All right, Coach Barnes, thank you so much for your time today with our guys.